This month, Congress is expected to vote on the Iran nuclear deal. Delaware Senator Tom Carper recently announced his support for the nuclear agreement. And this week, Senator Chris Coons made his position clear. Senator Coons, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Shirley.
You endorsed the deal in spite of its flaws, as you said in your announcement this week. And you also had some initial disappointment with the deal. So what changed to where you're now supporting it?
Well, first, I spent a lot of time studying and understanding the deal. It's very complex. It's very dense. It's 159 pages. There's all sorts of classified annexes. I sat through more than a dozen hearings on the Foreign Relations Committee and classified briefings before I felt like I really understood the good sides and the bad sides of this deal. For me, a critical turning point was meeting with the ambassadors from the United Kingdom, France, Germany, China, Russia, the other major countries that are signatories to this agreement, countries that have already ratified it. And they were very clear, both positively and negatively, about two things that mattered to me. First, that they are absolutely committed to enforcing the deal, even as their countries build stronger and better relationships with Iran. That's a real concern to me. Will they stand by us and rigorously enforce this deal, even as Iran tries to cheat, which I'm convinced they will? Second, that they would not go back to negotiations, that they didn't feel there was a better deal possible, and that they would resist reimposing sanctions. Those who advocate for voting against this deal, and there's many of them in Delaware, many personal friends of mine, believe it would be easy for us to reimpose sanctions and to go back and negotiate a better deal. I met with lots of folks who are seasoned enforcers of sanctions and were diplomats who negotiated this deal. And ultimately, regrettably, I was persuaded that that's not going to work. And so in a situation of choosing between two undesirable paths, I think the better path is to try diplomacy with our vital allies, do everything we can to strengthen this deal through deterrence and aggressive enforcement. And if we then end up having to use military force against Iran, we will have better intelligence, we will have the support of our allies because we tried diplomacy first.
Would you call this then the lesser of two evils?
Yes.
Okay. Is it unrealistic to think that there is this perfect deal out there that would? Okay.
I mean, I think it's clear. We had punishing, effective multilateral sanctions in place against Iran for years now. And even in that environment, they have been steadily increasing the number of their centrifuges, steadily growing their uranium stockpile. They have 12 tons of enriched uranium right now. We couldn't bomb that away. They have hundreds of nuclear scientists who have mastered the production of uranium. We can't bomb that away.
So
in this deal, they give that up.
But how can we trust that they will hold up their end of the bargain?
We can't trust that they'll hold up their end of the bargain. We shouldn't trust that they'll hold up any. We should have inspectors on site 24/7 for all their nuclear facilities, which this deal provides. And we should invest even more in our intelligence capabilities and ensure that we've gotten firm commitments from our European allies that they too see a nuclear Iran as an existential threat and would back the use of force. I sent a letter to the president asking him 7 specific points where I had real concerns with this deal. And I did not get a final satisfactory to me letter until the day I announced my support. A whole series of conversations with the vice president, the secretary of state, and the president that I made both while on a trip to Africa and from here in Delaware ultimately persuaded me the administration sees these risks clearly and will work with our allies to deal with them. But I think those of us in Congress also have a real responsibility over the years to come to enforce this deal aggressively, deeply distrusting Iran.
One of the U.S.'s allies, Israel, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, denounces the deal.
Yes.
You have the American-Israel Public Action Committee launching an aggressive media campaign against it. Did you speak to Israeli leaders about it? And did you speak to anyone in Israel who felt differently from Netanyahu?
Yes. So 3 things. I had a long conversation with the Israeli ambassador, Ron Dermer, who is an aggressive and very capable advocate for the Prime Minister's views. I had some very painful and heartfelt conversations directly with friends in Israel this past week, friends I've known a long time and who've been great supporters and partners. I got to know them working at a nonprofit in education many years ago, and they're wonderful people. And they were hugely upset at the idea that I could possibly support this deal. They're very opposed to it. I also heard from Israelis by Facebook, email, Twitter, who I know from other work together that supported the deal. There was also a campaign to bring former security and military leaders. There was a former Israeli admiral who was here who met with folks in my office and spoke to the community here in support of the deal, former heads of Mossad and Shin Bet. There's been a whole campaign to have U.S. military and intelligence leaders, former members of Congress, folks who are nuclear proliferation specialists to speak in favor of the deal, as well as Israeli security leaders. And there's been a comparable mirror campaign to get folks from all those different backgrounds to speak against the deal. At the end of the day, the insight that mattered, the input that mattered the most to me was not a TV ad campaign, was not the sort of national partisanship around this. It was Delawareans who've invested a great deal of time in calling my office and meeting with me and helping me understand their views. I think this is a close call. Those who suggest that this is easy, that this deal is either just out of hand awful or obviously good, either haven't read it or aren't clear about the consequences and how untrustworthy Iran is. I think
it's easy to armchair quarterback.
I think it's very easy to critique this one way or the other. If you really delve into the details, it is difficult. This is the least bad path forward that does give us more intelligence. They give up their uranium stockpile. They give up their plutonium pathway. And for 15 years, they give up their uranium enrichment pathway. But Iran will try to do very bad things with the money they get from sanctions relief. We have to be diligent in stopping them. And after 15 years, we have a big challenge in their very large uranium enrichment program.
All right, Senator Coons, thank you. We're going to wrap
Thank you.
up. Great having you here, and thanks again for your time here on First. Continuing coverage of the Iran nuclear deal can be found online at newsworks.org.